Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Leveling Up webinar. It's so good to see so many of you on. I'm just pausing a little bit because I can see the participants still going up, so I'll give it 2 more seconds. But yeah, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Leveling Up webinar. I'm so glad to see so many people have joined, especially as we've got a list of people across the country as well. Across the UK, so thank you everyone for joining. Firstly, I'd like to say congratulations to everyone that's received some funding in round 2. I've been through the list and there's some real fantastic, exciting schemes out there. So it's really good to see, and I'm so glad that it has actually come forward to funding. So well done to all of you. So as a way of introduction, my name is Chris Harrison. I'm the Regional Director at Project Centre. Now, if we move on to the next slide, please, Mark. For those that don't know Project Centre, we're a multidisciplinary consultancy. As you can see, some of our services on there. Now, at Project Centre, we've been lucky enough to be involved in a number of round 1 schemes. And we've used quite a lot of these services that you can see on the screen in order to take the scheme forward and be successful on getting these on the ground. And we'll come to a few of them schemes in a minute through some of our project managers. We've also been involved in a number of round 2 bids, successful bids as well, with a number of clients as part of that. And that's why we've sort of gone to put this webinar on, was just through the amount of questions we were getting from clients around what the next stages are and what they should be thinking about at the moment, and suddenly get some bit of funding. So hopefully this webinar will just give you a bit of an introduction of what we found from round 1, and you'll hear from some of the project managers. And it might just give you a few ideas around what to do next, what you could include, and different elements. And if you don't get any of that, then hopefully you'll at least realise that you're not alone in the pressure of having to try and deliver at record pace. Now the funding's been delayed slightly and you've still got to hit your deadline. So hopefully that will help all of you just know you're in with everyone else. So I'll just move on to the agenda, and we'll go through the panel in a minute, but I want to keep this quite informal, really, and hopefully hear from yourselves quite a bit in terms of the questions, and then we can have a bit of discussion with the panel. But we'll start off at the beginning, just going through some of our round 1 schemes. So Bratty will talk to us about Gainsborough and Whitechapel Road, and then we'll have Chris talk about Northolt. And then what I'll do is I'll bring in Steph, who will give us a bit of a discussion around how important consultation and engagement is to these programs and other programs. And then we'll also bring in Nick, who will talk about air quality and how do we do some of that monitoring and feed that back into how successful some of your schemes have been. And then the second half of this will be the bit that I really want to get onto, which is for yourselves to ask questions, and hopefully for us to give you some answers, and get through as many as we possibly can. Just a bit of housekeeping. If you can all keep your microphones off, please, that would be great. And also, if you do have any questions, if you can use the question and answer box or panel at the bottom rather than the chat function, that'd be fantastic. That's just so that we can get all the questions in one place, rather than trying to switch between the chat and the questions, and that will help me out no end. So yeah, if we can do that, it'd be fantastic. So if I move on really to introduce the panel, so we're going to start off with Bratty. Now she's one of our associate directors in the landscape and urban design team, which is fair to say has been a growing team of experts around placemaking, regeneration of places over the last couple of years. So she'll give us a good feel around what she's been doing in round 1 for Gainsborough and Tower Hamlets. We then move on to Chris Durbin, who's our Technical Director, Traffic and Parking. Chris has been involved in an Ealing project, for levelling up funding, but he's also been involved in lots of active travel projects, including improvements to walking, cycling, and how we can change the behaviours. So very much a good mix of all the different sort of funding pots that are around at the moment. So Chris has been leading a lot of projects that have got a lot of experience in that. Next we'll speak to Steph. Steph recently joined us from Transport for London and heads up our communication and engagement team. She's got a big wealth of experience in terms of how to engage with communities and how to get the best out of consultation, doing an engagement consultation which really then benefits your schemes and actually celebrates how great some of your schemes are. So we'll talk to her as well. And then finally, Nick, who is our Director of Environment. Nick has the honourable job of making sure that we meet our net zero pledge. Not only meet it, but no pressure, Nick, but to deliver it in a quick time as well, quicker than normal. And his role also includes in his team, he's got carbon analysis that sit and look at our projects, record what we're doing, just so that we can make sure that we're doing the best we can in terms of our implementation and maintenance, and reducing the carbon throughout the whole footprint of one of our schemes as well. So it's a really important element of what we're trying to do at Project Centre, and that's been part of the sort of the LUF as well. Now, so what I'll do is I will move straight on to the presentations and get the actual project managers to give you their overview. So I'll move on next to Bharati, who will start taking you through Gainsborough.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for attending the webinar today. As Chris said, I'll talk about Gainsborough and Tower Hamlets projects. These are two projects that I'm leading on since the round one funding was allocated. Gainsborough, in fact, located in West Lindsey, we were taken on board when they first started to put together their application for the Levelling Up Fund. And we prepared a public realm strategy for the town of Gainsborough to identify the priority projects that needed to be taken forward to revitalize the town center again. So these were three key schemes. There's an existing riverside park, the long green area that you can see alongside the river. This has been over the years, it's kind of lost its purpose. It just seems to look like a forest of trees with no clear links, and it kind of blocks, in fact, the views towards the river. We have, and it also includes a derelict toilet block, the little building that you can see there. We are completely transforming this park to turn it into a connector between the town center and the river, so to draw people towards the riverside, which is a really lovely walk, in fact. And to revitalize this whole area, we are currently at the concept stage. In fact, we've developed a couple of concepts, and the client has given us direction in which one they want us to take forward into stage 3. The second project is a derelict industrial site, again alongside the river, which is owned by the council. It used to be a mill, which was kind of decommissioned some years back, and the site was fenced off and completely overgrown, again blocking views to the river. And the location of this site is right at the start of the main commercial, the main high street. So it forms a really fantastic gateway, and it was completely underused. So we identified this as a really good pocket park, and we have developed concept designs again for this one, and again have been given direction on which one of the concept designs is to be taken forward into stage 3. The market square, it's a historic market square, really very nicely paved. In about 2012, they did some public realm upliftment in this town center. However, it's quite tired looking. It's lost its vitality over the years. There's a lot of loss of retail units, and the council, they wanted to bring this back to life. And one of the items of the Leveling Up Fund are a new cinema in that big orange block that you can see. So this gave further incentive to revitalize the market square. So we have, if you go on to the next slide, please. Yes, so we've kind of come up with designs. As I said, concept designs are completed. The council got in there quite early, and as soon as they took us on board by the ESPO framework, we got all of the surveys required done, and the council carried on further consultations with the community so we could take on board all of the feedback that came through from there. And these are just some images of the proposals that we are taking forward now. The scheme is we expect to complete the design part of it sometime in the end of this year, and construction to start early next year. So hopefully we'll be hitting some of those key targets in time. Could we go to the next slide, please? The next project is one of the busiest streets in London, actually. This is in Tower Hamlets. Some of you may be familiar with Whitechapel Street. It is extremely busy. It's part of the Transport for London road network, so a red route, actually. But this section of it is the section where you have the Whitechapel station and the new Crossrail. You have a historic market, historic sense, I don't know, really from the time when this area has gone through a lot of change in terms of the communities that have lived here. And currently that market is in a pretty rundown state. The traders tend to just spill out as in wherever they want. They don't stick to there. This is a usual case, I think, with most markets over time. On the opposite side, the southern side, the Tower Hamlets has moved their town hall into this area as well. So they want to see this as a gateway into town hall, into Tower Hamlets. So there was this need to really uplift this area from what it was to turn it into a really high quality space. So we developed a vision a couple of years ago, and high quality costs for that. The council then used that to apply for Leveling Up funding, and they were successful. And we continued on to work on the later stages. It's extremely complex because it's also an area of complex engineering for TfL, with a lot of underground tunnels and things like that. And there's the hospital, which causes a lot of traffic, ambulance traffic, actually. You constantly hear the siren of the ambulance in this area. And this is also a place where you have the cycle superhighway running through. So lots of things happening, but we were not changing anything of the carriageway. We were really looking at uplifting the public realm only. And we've managed to get quite ahead in this work. As you can see, the images at the bottom, they show the construction is well on the way. So this one is hopefully, meeting all of those targets, and will be a brand new scheme come mid next year. I'll pass on to Chris Durbin so he can tell you about the third project we are working on. Thank you.
Thanks, Bharati. Morning, everyone. If we go to the next slide. This is Northolt. So Northolt's a scheme in West London. It's part of Ealing Borough, but as people in Northolt will say, it's perhaps the forgotten area of Ealing. It sits out on the northwest side. So the Northolt scheme is an active travel scheme. It has a value of 8 million, so it's not the largest in terms of allocations from Levelling Up, either from the current round or from the first round. What this plan is showing you here is that Northolt has two centres. To the north, there's Northolt Station, so lots of travel towards the underground stop there. And to the south, you can see the orange area is White Hart, and that's the second centre. So our scheme is very much about trying to connect those two centres and create a community along that corridor. So that the main line that you can see running along there is the A312. So it's two roads, which is Mandeville Road to the north and Church Road to the south. So as part of our scheme, we've been looking at introducing active travel measures, seeing active travel as a means to get people to cycle, wheel and walk locally, to use the local facilities with a view to trying to energise the local community and to have more money spent locally, as opposed to the view, particularly when I started the project and we started looking at it, people say, I know Northolt because I drive through it, but we don't actually use any of the facilities. So it's a main route, again, as Bharati said, part of the Transport for London network for the southern section that people use as part of their daily journey, but don't actually stop and see the local sites. So what I wanted to mention to you, which Bharati's not covered, is how we set things up as part of round one. So initially, when we got involved from November 2021, we had a 3-month period called a discovery phase. And this phase was very much used as a transition period and a means to set out what the data we were going to collect was and to understand the existing data from the business case. So for those of you starting your round 2 projects, you'll find that you've got a chance to re-establish your baseline and confirm what the data is that you're going to record. And that's something that you'll be asked to report on going throughout the life of your project over the coming 2 years. So that's exactly what we did, and we report on a quarterly cycle, in our case to the DFT. So that's one of the things I'd say to everyone. It's worth focusing on that and ensuring that you have that data captured and agreed. And as in our case, it might change throughout the life of your project. So we've had Active Travel England, who have been active in terms of our project and delivery. They didn't exist when we started, but they're now part of our process. And for any of you who have a cycling, wheeling and walking element, you'll find that they will be a key stakeholder for you, both helping you along the way in terms of the tools they offer, and in terms of giving guidance and assistance, in terms of the experts they can now call on to ensure that the scheme that you've got meets the requirements that they have nationally. So the other thing that I wanted to mention about our scheme here was the importance of setting up a delivery team. And I would mention that we've had numerous people involved in Northolt. So Steph, who's going to talk, has been part of our scheme in terms of engagement, but we've had other partners who've been set up. So on the client team, there's been a concerted effort here from not just the highways team, but from regeneration team, planning colleagues. We've had master planning teams involved with Northolt to create a wider 20-minute neighbourhood concept and a master plan for Northolt, of which this Levelling Up Fund scheme is a key element and the flagship element moving forwards over the next 2 years. So in addition to that, I also wanted to mention the importance of getting the local community involved, and that's something that we found through our project, that we are going through a third round of engagement on the project, but ensuring that people are actively engaged from the outset and that there's a strong local community focus, so that as either design experts or as a client team that knows the area, you feed those ideas into it so that can help to shape the way you move forward with your project. In our case, be it whether it's identifying the actual locations where people want to cross or the actual facilities that people want to use, and specifically looking about the different demographics of your area, whether it's elderly people, whether it's people with certain characteristics, and understanding the right mix of intervention in a specific area to meet their needs and potentially the aspiration and the direction in which you want your area to go in. Thanks. At that point, I'll hand on.
Thanks, Chris. And that's a great segue into, see if that was planned, into Steph. Do you want to take us through some sort of the engagement and communication?
Yeah, thanks, Chris and Chris. That was a great segue. So as Chris mentioned, I'm Steph Bortoli, Head of Communications and Engagement at Project Centre. Prior to Project Centre, I was with Transport for London, working on projects including the Elizabeth Line and the transformation of the bus and active travel networks. And then prior to that, I was in Australia working on major road and rail projects. So our team at Project Centre, our communications and engagement team, are qualified practitioners with the International Association of Public Participation, so IAP2. And that really, the ethos of that is that we believe meaningful engagement and participation happens when communities and stakeholders are involved at a formative stage, where there's genuine opportunity to influence decision making. And we accept that that might be at several different points throughout the life cycle of any project. So not necessarily a sort of a one-time opportunity throughout a life cycle of the project. And Chris just reflected on that, which has been the case absolutely with Northolt. I think if we take a sort of a step back a little bit, as I'm sure everyone acknowledged in that initial bid process, communities are absolutely at the heart of the levelling up agenda. And that was made really clear in the infrastructure roadmap to 2030, which the government's Infrastructure and Projects Authority published. And in that roadmap, they said, our interventions in the built environment do not sufficiently recognise the importance of local context or the complexity of the changing need of the people that use them. So I think while there's definitely best practice happening all over the country from an engagement and consultation perspective, by and large, I think that statement speaks to a perceived and real lack of engagement and collaboration and partnership with communities and stakeholders throughout the sort of planning and delivery phase of infrastructure projects. So I think that suggests there is real ambition to change that, and LUF is definitely, LUF projects are really definitely a clear mechanism for authorities to do just that, and that's really exciting. Some of the sort of golden threads throughout that roadmap talk about regeneration being a really sort of collaborative long-term community partnership that builds on local strengths. And I think a really good example of that is Whitechapel that Bharati's spoken about. You know, a really unique community with really unique needs, and understanding what they are before progressing into the delivery of a project is really, really important to build that regeneration. That roadmap also talks about sort of making sure that we translate these societal outcomes and national policy into things that are very local, and they speak to local people and they meet local priorities. So things like net zero are a really good example of that. What does that actually mean when you're delivering a local project for local people? What does net zero mean for that community? So it is a really exciting time, and community engagement and stakeholder engagement are a never-changing practice, and there's lots of opportunity to do things differently, and it is also the right thing to do to make sure that we're spending public money in a way that meets the needs of people who are going to use those services and those projects. So I think that's sort of the context of LUF projects, is that there is a real need to make sure that they are community centered, and that community involvement is a golden thread right throughout that planning and delivery. I think just the other sort of final thing I'll say is there's also a really good financial case for good engagement. So I mentioned I'm originally from Australia, and some research in Australia in about 2017, which involved hundreds of government authorities, academia, construction companies and consultancies, the research explored the relationship between Australia's then infrastructure boom and community engagement. And the findings of that were that community protest, community opposition, the blocking of statutory processes, and a general lack of engagement actually contributed to cancellation, delay, and redesign of major infrastructure projects in the order of about 30 billion Australian dollars. And that's not insignificant. That's really, really significant. So, you know, in a similar sort of situation here in the UK, where the pace and scale of delivery is increasing, it really does pay to do that engagement well, and to make sure that process is a genuine, transparent process, and it adds value to the successful delivery of your project. So it's a very exciting time. I'm sure we'll come on to some questions shortly.
Excellent, thanks, Steph. Yeah, a few things there to sort of think about and to take in. and we will come on to a few questions in a minute. But before we do that, Nick, would you like to come in?
Thanks, Chris, and hi everyone, good morning. And for 20 years, I've been writing policy and securing funding for regeneration schemes. And the way we now collect, analyse and utilise data is fundamentally different. This picture was taken about 12 years ago when I was working at a local authority, and I clearly recall the limitations on manual data collection. And what we've got now is affordable smart city IoT devices. We've got AI, we've got machine learning, we've got data dashboards. And these are really revolutionizing how we understand our urban and rural environments. Digitization has allowed hyperlocal data to be collected, scrutinized, and rather than have to rely on increasingly uncertain post-pandemic legacy modeling techniques that we all love. And understanding street by street data and time of day data and our air quality conditions can identify sources of pollution, including traffic, wood burning, across a number of pollutants, and help develop interventions, both hard and soft, to minimize our personal exposure. And it's not just compliance monitoring either for local and national targets. It's more about providing residents and businesses with the information they need to make lifestyle choices to suit them. Today is actually the 10th anniversary of the death of Ellie Kissa Deborah. And over the last 10 years, we're all more acutely aware of the impact of air pollution on the human body throughout our lives, from pregnancy to old age. I see a lot of you on today's webinar got DEFRA funding as well for air quality projects, as well as your LUF funding. And these are to develop pollution busting projects and new tools to support the public in making healthy choices for low pollution and low carbon living. Good quality and clearly presented data is key to justifying and validating the delivery of your scheme outcomes. And more importantly, securing public and political support, touching on what Steph was talking about in terms of engagement. And poor air quality and decarbonisation are two of the key environmental and public health challenges our towns and cities are facing. LUF projects can address both the local economic issues as well as environmental and health. I urge you all, funding or not, to review your data sources and look at the new wave of digital techniques that we can offer to provide the necessary evidence both before, during and after your projects to support your local investment. That's me, Chris.
That's excellent. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, there's I would have said that photo is exactly the same now, Nick, so I can't believe that's 12 years ago. So what I'll do now, thank you all to our speakers there. I'll ask them all to come back on camera, and we'll answer some of the questions. Some questions in the Q&A. I'll encourage everyone, if you do have any questions on any of them presentations or on anything that as we discuss through, do drop them in the Q&A, or if there's other bits that you want to add in, please do add your parts into the questions, and you can type some answers in as well if you want to around that. So because I think it's good for everyone. I mean, we've been involved in lots of projects, but you know, yourselves also have your own projects that you've been involved in and can help your colleagues across the UK in terms of registers we've got. So make sure you feel part of this. Thank you first of all to the panel to sticking to their time limit and getting us through in the first half hour. I didn't have to mute anyone, so that was good. What I'll do is I will start off. So the first question that came in, Bratty, this is around the market pitches. I think probably around the Whitechapel side of things. I've dealt with markets in lots of different schemes we've done, and it can be quite tricky. So how have you overcome the market pitches from spilling over? How's that sort of engagement gone, and how's the sort of design going on that?
So in terms of the market pitches, there had been some work done some years back, and the market traders were really looking for some kind of permanent stalls. Which trader wouldn't want a permanent stall, really? So the council decided that it would be a good idea to bring in something that's semi-permanent, and we got on board as some architects to work on a design. this has been engagement, as Stephanie said, is so important to make sure everybody's on board. And we've had workshop sessions and and consultations throughout this process, really, particularly with the market traders, and they have been shown the design as it develops from the very beginning, and have contributed to it as well, I would say. So yes, there will be, I'm sure there will be some further issues to iron out, such as once the permanent stores do come in, they will not be able to spill out and spread their wear as they currently do. And the market operations officer has been working with the architects and with the market traders to address all of this. So hopefully once everything is up, things go quite smoothly. We are trialing out a prototype for about 3 to 4 months, which will be put up shortly. I think in March that will go up, and will allow the market traders to try it out. And this I feel is also very important, because that kind of shows them what they can really expect in reality, and get them further on board this whole process.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea, actually, doing that sort of trial, to just give people that flavour of it. And I know, not only with the market stores, but I'm sure it's Whitechapel where we put some of the surface down as well at the same time, so people could see what the material was going to be, and then you can have that comment. So actually actively going and doing something and putting it on the ground, one brings in that engagement, but it also, you see it in real life. It's not a drawing that you're looking at. You can see that, and then you can picture it out. So yeah, really, really good. And the other point around that, and it fits into kind of one of these questions, is around the amount of different stakeholders, even internal stakeholders, that are involved in these projects, and the importance of getting them on board. So around the market stalls, I know it was important to those that are going to be enforcing this afterwards, had to be involved in that kind of design element to make sure that it will be enforced later on, because otherwise you get to the point that you develop and deliver something, and then it doesn't get enforced once it's in. So that was really sort of key to it as part. So just moving on, there's a few questions, Steph. There's a few questions for yourself, so we'll take on that. So with the push on delivery, how can authorities still deliver good consultations and engagement processes in compressed time frames? Do you want to come in on that?
Very good question. I think I'll try and, we could talk all day about this, I think, and happy to have conversations with anybody after the session. But I think if we were, if I was to pull out sort of a couple of really key things, a sort of top three perhaps, the first thing I think is have a really good think about what the red lines of your project or scheme are. And by that, I mean, identify areas where community and stakeholder input and insight and feedback will genuinely be valuable in how you progress your project. So insights that are going to be useful and that are going to influence the decisions you make. Essentially what's up for grabs. And it's really important to identify those negotiables and non-negotiables, because we know communities are really tired of saying things and feeling like they're not being listened to. So this idea that consultation exercises are a tick box is really prevalent and not helped by emergency measures that we saw in the pandemic that has increased that perception of a tick box exercise. So we really need to be upfront with communities around what is up for negotiation and what isn't, and focusing our efforts on the what is, and that also includes, when we talk about red lines, overlaying what are your statutory consultation obligations as well. So that is sort of the key, the top priority, I would say, when you're designing a process. The second thing I would say, and it's really aligned to the above in terms of mitigating that sort of community consultation fatigue, is make sure that we've done our homework in terms of what has that community been engaged on or consulted on previously, whether it's related directly or not to this project. I'm sure most of the projects that we're talking about will have had some level of engagement already, to varying degrees, but what has been said already, either about the project specifically or potentially policies relating to, and use that as a bit of a baseline for, okay, well, what other information that will add value do we need to capture from the community, rather than repeating an exercise that perhaps has already happened previously. So don't ask things twice, essentially, because that aggravates people and fatigues people. And so the sort of final thing, I guess, and they're all really related, is just think hard about, and this responds to a couple of the other questions in the chat box, actually, is think, all the research shows, as we've seen, that doing engagement well and investing in that pays off in terms of the successful, smooth and efficient delivery of your project. But think about where that investment is best made. And so sometimes we fall into the trap of seeking quantity of participation rather than quality of participation, and think about where are the areas in my community who are not going to be able to engage in this process in the traditional sense, and how can I invest in engaging with those communities. And so by that I mean, having some really deliberate and well thought through engagement with your disabled community, with older people in your community, younger people from ethnic minorities, being very, very deliberate about how that engagement is designed and investing in that. There were some questions in the chat about, how do you do that? There were some really good examples during the pandemic, actually, about how platforms like Nextdoor are being used to communicate with people in places where they already are and where they already feel comfortable engaging. So tools like that are really, really useful because they're already sort of established. Established forums are really, really important in considering your engagement program. That goes from faith groups to football clubs, community gardens. Where are people already? Where do they feel comfortable and confident engaging, and how do you tap into that? So speaking with faith leaders and supporting faith leaders to do that and facilitate that engagement for you is one way. Somebody asked about communicating and engaging with groups for whom English isn't a first language. Speaking to those community leaders in the area and asking them to support you in that engagement, what that looks like, what their investment needs to look like for that, and how you support that. But getting them to do that on your behalf, because people already trust that forum and that channel of engagement. So they're the top three things I would say, Chris.
Excellent, thanks, Steph. Yeah, that's great, and thanks for sort of answering some of them as well. But yeah, I think overall, I think it is about that, getting the right quality out of it, and the way that you frame it to make sure that you can see the change in people's opinions afterwards as well. So it's just really important to get that, what you're going to do and how you're going to sort of present it, so that you can show afterwards the real benefits and what people are seeing from there. Just moving on. So Chris Derwent, I think this is probably one for you. Active Travel England, how has the engagement gone in terms of response speed? I've been told that they are currently very busy at the moment with the rollout of their new statutory consultee role for development planning. So how have you got on?
They are very busy. We've met them twice, but virtually like this, in terms of running through the project and getting sign off at REBA 3 stage, so at prelim design stage for our scheme. So we found the experience to be very good with them. When we did meet with Hassan at the time, he did say they had over 1,000 projects live. So we know they've got an awful lot on. I think all I would say is try and communicate to them early to get a time slot. But what we found specifically was that there's a need to have a discussion like this to let them know, as you can imagine, your projects are going to be very big, impressive projects. It's very hard for them to get their head around that from just the presentation of data without a dialogue like this. So we found the most beneficial thing was to present like this a scheme, to spend half an hour talking through the objectives and telling them exactly what the detail of the scheme was and what it was trying to address, so that they could then formulate their opinions based on that. And we found they were more than happy to contribute in a very constructive way to that. And probably most importantly for everyone who has an active travel scheme is that they're only looking to assist, and they're only looking to give comment on what you present to them. So they have no desire specifically to input new design elements to you. They will purely base their assessment on what you as a client team and as the project sponsor have said you're looking to deliver. We found that made it very easy. So if we said we were looking to facilitate cycling down a particular route, they would give us advice on that. But vice versa, if we weren't looking to deliver something, they wouldn't go back to 120 and give advice on elements that we weren't looking to incorporate into the delivery. So all in all, very, very useful, but get it in early and try and have a dialogue like this so that you can get them onto the same level as quickly as possible as your project team are.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. They are definitely busy around that, but very much around that. They are. It is useful, even if you don't feel you're quite ready to have that conversation with them. Have the conversation with them, because they do help. They are there as a body to sort of help and give advice. I think when we originally looked at some of these, we felt it was almost like a gateway to get through. This is how it's designed, and this is, we're meeting the targets and we're doing this. But actually, very much the more you talk to them, the more it is about that they want to help. They want to show you, actually, this is what we would like to see. This is what the bits are. So one thing for me is, don't wait to the point where you got so far and then have that conversation with thinking, oh, we've arrived to the right level that we need. Try and have that a little bit earlier, and they'll be able to advise and help in that process. So very much one of them. That's what I would say about that. So don't wait till it's too late, because otherwise you might have to change stuff around as well. Just sticking with yourself, Chris, maybe Bratty as well. So one of the things that keep coming up for me is around the issue of kind of inflation and the cost of everything that's coming is going higher and higher. How have we got on, or how have we been involved in making sure, like, the schemes that we're working on, actually that doesn't necessarily become a problem? What have we done and stuff like that either at the beginning or now, which is a lot more of an issue. So I don't know, Chris or Bratty, do you want to come in on that?
I'll start now for you, Chris. Yeah, sure. So we have found it's an issue in terms of inflation from using existing framework contracts. So trying to using the existing highway contractor. So we linking with what Steph picked up on. We've tried to go back to local people and use local evidence for what's most important for delivery. So where there's cost pressure, to look to prioritise those elements through engagement, and if there's a need to remove elements, not to say they won't go ahead, but to identify those and say they can be done maybe later on with additional funding through the master planning, so through 106 or through other development works in our case. So that's been our approach to it. The other aspect is, because Northolt as a scheme is very linear and covers a large extent, we were never planning to recreate the entire streetscape of what's probably about 3 or 4 kilometres of network. So it's looking at the materiality then and looking at where you can make money potentially go further in terms of the type of treatment. Northolt has a mixture of very, very high specification around an area called Village Green, which is the gem locally that's looked at, and other areas that are more functional and going back to standard streetscape design for the local authority. So it's looking at getting that mix so you can still achieve that and potentially reducing down the construction cost to balance with inflationary increases.
Yeah, no, it's quite difficult. Bratty, do you want to add anything onto that, or?
I think Chris has covered most of it, really. It's really about assessing what are the priority areas and focusing on those, so that at least those come through. And also, for instance, we are looking at one of the Gainsborough projects. We have initially thought of repaving, for instance, the whole section along the Riverside Walk. However, we are now looking at, it's in good condition. Does it need to really be completely changed? Can we incorporate what is existing into the design? So it's just about finding savings and making sure that you can, meet the problems caused by inflation. Yeah.
I think one of the key things, I think some of the projects we've been involved in, is and this goes to working with everyone else in your council or authority around, you know, what other funding that is currently around or programs they're involved in. Because these are quite big, often we work alongside some of the other elements, whether there's maintenance already going on, if there's resurfacing of roads or pavements that are due to happen anyway, is there, you know, behaviour change programs that are already happening within schools, or is there other sort of cycle hangers that are already going in that are part of a different funding pot. And actually a lot of the things we worked on, where it could have started off at £10 million, you actually find by the time that you finished, actually it would have been a 20 million, 25 million pound project if you just base it properly from the outset and have a look at what else is going on around the area. And one of the key things, like active travel, is where can you use this funding to go that little bit further? Where can you use this to think, well, we've got this, actually we can now probably attract a bit more funding for this project that just sits out just outside the boundary of this, or it might be within the boundary but not within your scope. So by having this, you'll find there's a lot of other people that probably want to jump on the back of the funding and think we can also fund in this area. So it's amazing how these projects, so I would urge at the beginning to just have a bit of a think about that, just sit down and think, okay, we've got our project, our scope, and I know that's a lot to deal with in a lot of cases, but what else is there that could happen? Because you might get too far down the line and it not be a reality. So do have a think about that, and that could potentially help with the rising costs and so on and so forth. I'm going to pick up on a question that was posted in the chat, which I was told I'm not allowed to do, but I will do. Steph, there's a question about how did you engage those people who don't currently use your town centre? How did you contact them initially? Social media, leaflet drops, etc.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and actually something that we hear quite a lot. So when we are involved in the planning and delivery of active travel schemes, and we know there's a lot of contention around the design of active travel schemes and the inclusive design or not of those schemes. And there's lots of conversation around that from with the disability community about the fact that it's really hard to understand and assess the experiences of disabled people with regard to those schemes if they're actually not using them in the first instance because of the inaccessibility of them. So it's that idea of, well, how do you get insights and feedback and engagement from people who are not, you know, experiencing the infrastructure that you're intending to put in place or that is in place. So in that instance, definitely reaching out to, as I said, those community leaders and people who, you know, mobility forums that are already established and having those conversations. I think what you're talking about, and feel free to correct me, is, you know, we want more people to use our town centre and we want more people to come to our town centre, or having a think about who are they, who are those people, what are their characteristics, and what is that community profile, and going out to those groups and to those people and in the, as I said before, in the places that they are already likely to be. And then the second part of that, I think I mentioned around next door is really good, because that enables you to target geographic locations. So, you know, if you know that, you know, people within X radius of the town centre are frequently visiting it, if you've got that sort of origin and destination information, but you know that there's an outer sort of donut that isn't, you can really target those you can really target those areas, those geographic areas through tools like social media, like Nextdoor, like Facebook. You can target your engagement opportunities and your feedback opportunities to those geographic areas. So I would absolutely recommend that as a tool. And then the other thing, it is high investment and it can be considered a bit old school, but getting out on the street and popping up in the places that they're likely to be, you know, at their high street, at the football club on a weekend, and having those conversations with people, or at least signposting them to where that opportunity to engage and to feedback is, so you can get the insights from people who aren't specifically already using that infrastructure or project area.
Okay, thanks, Steph. I think it is important to get out there as well, and I think social media has its part to play very much in this now, and I think it's important to work out how you're going to use social media to better your sort of responses and so on and so forth. It can be you know, as people know, it can be an avenue that you don't necessarily want to go because of some of the criticism that you might get through it. But I think if you plan it in the right way, it can be something that's fantastic in terms of getting that back. So yeah, and I just want to touch on one, which I think a question I missed, so I apologise. But Steph, it says our investment is seeing the delivery of electric vehicle chargers and EV buses, and we're keen to capture the updated views pre and post delivery on a behaviour change perspective. So I know previously you've been involved in bus routes and engagement stuff. So if there's anything particular you want to touch on now, or potentially follow up later, we can follow up later. But I don't know if there's anything just to touch on.
Yeah, just quickly, obviously, and you've referenced it there, Andrew, in your question. There is a real difference in capturing insights that are designed to monitor and evaluate, as compared to capturing insights that are designed to influence and shape how your project is delivered. And there is a crossover there, obviously, based on what those evaluation insights tell you, you know, whether you might want to tweak or make changes or take a different direction. But I think one of the things that, you know, I got involved in market research a couple of weeks ago, and it was 4.5 hours. And I did it because I wanted to, you know, it was with the Department of Education and play a part in my civic duty. But that's a really long time for people to, you know, volunteer their time to be involved in a market research project. So market research and polling are really expensive, and they're really time intensive often for the people for whom you're trying to access those insights from to monitor and evaluate. That's not to say that they don't have their place, they absolutely do. But in the specific example that you're referring to, and something that we've found works really well is, you know, there are people already using those services. So on buses, for example, or at charging points, and particularly where it is relevant to public transport. So the example that you've used there on EV buses, I would incentivize people to participate and make that participation really quick and really easy, and at the point in time where they have some time to use. So when they're on the bus, something that says, you know, tell us how your experience has been today. It's a really quick, opportunity for them to do so while they're sitting on that bus, you know, QR code or whatever it might be, and incentivize that for a, free travel card, so a value card or something like that. And we've seen that work really well, because then you can also do that at the end phase of the process, at the end post implementation phase of the process, and you've got a pretty good comparative benchmark. That's not to say that you still shouldn't sort of invest in some of those more bespoke audiences and have those sort of focused conversations. But while people have the time on the bus, make it quick, make it easy, and incentivize their participation in that. I think is really something we can probably capitalize more on.
Yeah, no, thank you, Steph. That's really good. Nick, I would like to bring you in slightly to answer a couple of questions, but I think for me the kind of some of the work that we've been doing, some of the projects around sort of the air quality monitoring has been a real sort of eye opener for myself in terms of, you know, how local you can get these the monitors to look at what's happening, and when you make a change, what that actually means for the people that are walking on the street, rather than it just being, you know, in this area there's improvement or there's bad air in terms of it. Can you just give us a little bit, just a small introduction on that, you know, and what we've done in some schemes? And I know I mentioned earlier about the opportunity to, you know, look at other funding outside of this funding to complement the schemes. And I know we've just had a number of DEFRA bids that have been successful, which is, you know, there are things that can add on to this type of scheme and build it to make it a lot more holistic. So can you touch on that a little bit for us, Nick?
Absolutely, Chris, thanks. And to answer the second question first, the vision document is really interesting, because a lot of the projects are around monitoring and softer measures, behavior change, information services. So they really complement the Levelling Up Fund program of hard engineering improvements to town centres. So using the two together is a really interesting way of getting more bang for your buck, really, using the DEFRA funding to monitor, and then to use the data to educate your residents and your businesses about air quality and routing, and then using your LUF funding to improve town centres and urban environments really go hand in hand. So that's why it was really handy that the DEFRA announcement was last week, and I saw the list of attendees, and a number of you have DEFRA funding as well. So do talk to your air quality colleagues back at your authorities to see where the two can meet. In terms of air quality and how it's monitored, I think someone asked a question about modelling, and historically we have just relied on modelling, and air quality modelling is quite similar to strategic transport modelling. It absolutely has a place in understanding an indication of the regional impact, but large scale air quality models are only based on a small amount of data. There's only about 500 DEFRA air quality monitors across the UK. So it's a blend of a small amount of data and then assumptions made across a quite large area. So what has happened over the last few years is that these new smaller devices have been developed, and these can be put on a street by street. Essentially, you can have a town centre, and every street can have its own unique small scale monitor. There we go. Where's my camera? There's my camera. There's one. It goes on a lamp column, and this can collect so much data. This tests the air every 5 minutes, so it can really give us a day by day, street by street view of what's happening within a very local area. And a lot of things affects air quality. Pollution disperses in lots of different ways based on the street layout, based on trees, based on buildings, based on green infrastructure, blue infrastructure. So the data that comes from these gives us a real insight into what's happening locally rather than a national model. And I suppose it's the same of doing traffic counts on a junction to get local improvements at that junction compared to a strategic model. So that's how I always liken the new approach to air quality data collection. And another question I saw was about how some of our clients are sharing this with residents, and I can touch on that. So the data that comes from these goes across to the cloud and presented on a dashboard, and these dashboards some of our clients are sharing with residents, on residents portal, so they can click on the monitor on their street and see exactly what that is showing them. They can look at historic data, then look at live data, they can see how it changes throughout the day in terms of the morning peak, the afternoon peak. We've seen some really unusual things with our monitors when a ship goes past in on a river. We're seeing it pick up. We're seeing it pick up things like roadworks in the evenings. So some really unusual things that the national strategic models wouldn't pick up, but things that are impacting local pollution and local exposure. So when residents are looking at how they use their network, how they walk or cycle in their local areas, they can find out some good routes, some really good routes. So yeah, this data is, I say, it's new. This didn't exist back when I was working in local authority, and it's something that is really now quite accessible to authorities that have secured funding for various projects. There's easy ways to achieve this data collection. So yeah, it's amazing what it can do, and there's lots of examples, lots of case studies on our website that we'll share some links with this group as to what you can do with this data and what it looks like.
Yeah, it really is good, and I love a lot of the DEFRA bits that fit alongside it is, working with schools, and the children are so interested around this and the data and how, what makes it change and everything like that. It is really sort of interesting to see. So that kind of level of engagement to keep the sort of the younger generation involved in this is just, it really is good. It is fantastic, and as I said, it can be something that you can think about outside of the actual project, but actually can add to your project as well. So thank you very much. Sorry, go on, Nick.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Steph and I are working on a project at the moment for British Science Week. It's coming up in March, and we're looking at using a very small network outside of school to just show the students, the impact of how they get to and from school and how it changes in each of the roads, both outside the school and the air quality inside the school. So we'll be using the data to show them the impact. The theme this year for British Science Week is connection. So we're looking at connecting the pollution against their activity, you know, how they get to school, whether there's lots of driving or whether they cycle. So there's some of the things that we linking the data against some of the engagement work that we're doing.
Yeah, that's really good. Really good to see. And for them, for everyone, we can provide links, and obviously when the results are out, we'll be sharing that as well as part of it. Very conscious of time, so I do want to. I am going to wrap up on the questions there. Just want to say thank you to the panel. Thank you very much for speaking about your projects and everything there. A quick thank you to Landor, who helped us put this webinar on. So very appreciated that, and I know they've got lots of conferences and so on so coming up. So do have a look at them as well. But that is it really. Thank you very much for all attending. Thank you for your questions. I really hope it was useful. And you got something from it, and you can take something from these and help sort of focus on your projects over the next few weeks and then on to your sort of implementation. That's it from us. Please do, if you want to get in touch with us, please do. Please send through any details. If you've got any further questions that you can that you want answered, or to have another conversation or chat, then please do get in contact, and I'm more than happy to do that. But otherwise, thank you very much and have a good day.